Ahoy, everyone. This is David Perry and my continuing series of what I call Zoom TV interviews with people, colleagues, and friends dealing with the great pause and how we get into hopefully the great recovery. And today I'm delighted to be with a friend and colleague, the voice of the Coachella Valley himself, the publisher of the CV Independent, Jimmy Boegle. Jimmy, welcome.
My pleasure.
So, Jimmy, tell me when you first realized that COVID was going to be more than just that thing over there and something that was going to impact your life personally, but also your business as a journalist.
The two dates that really ring out to me when I realized how serious it had gotten was, first of all, when they canceled the tennis tournament here.
April.
When the night before, actually, this was in March. It was in early March. It was supposed to start on Monday, and on Sunday they actually did some pre-tournament stuff. They had a kids' day that our staff writer went out and covered, and that Sunday night they announced that the tennis tournament was going to be postponed. Later that was the week when things started to really get weird. Coachella got postponed, and then the second time when I really realized how scary it had gotten. And you actually had on a similar guest, one of the broadcast announcers on one of your other shows that I saw that discussed this, was the night that the NBA all of a sudden went to a screeching halt.
Yeah, and that was a fascinating interview. Craig Bolerjack is his name. His brother, Steve Bolerjack, is a writer, lives here in Palm Springs, and a dear friend. And he told me the story one day, and I said, I got to talk to this guy.
Yes, but I remember I was actually watching the Dodgers spring training game. I'm a big Los Angeles Dodgers fan. And I kept getting all these alerts on this phone about, the Oklahoma City game is being delayed. It's been postponed. We don't know why. It's been postponed because of a positive test. The NBA is postponing the rest of their games. And I'm sitting there watching this Los Angeles Dodgers spring training game. And it's going on like nothing has happened. They're interviewing the pitcher they just took out. And I'm thinking, I think this is going to be the last Dodger game I see for a while. And sure enough, it ended up being the last one until they started doing scrimmages again in July. And that was when I really realized this was getting serious. I don't think any of us at that point had a grasp on how serious and how long lasting and how dramatic it was going to be back then. But those were the moments when I finally realized, excuse my language, but holy shit, this is a big deal.
Yeah, it's my show, so you can, with certain exceptions, say certain words. I always remember watching 9/11, which nowadays seems like, another world. And it was the first time, I believe, in network TV history that they allowed the S word, S-H-I-T, to be said, because that moment when the second plane hit the towers and tens of thousands of people in Manhattan looked up and said that word at the same time, the networks decided there's no way to tell this story accurately without using that language. Well,
yes, and a lot of people around the country saw that as well, because a lot of the cameras, a lot of news had already gone to after the first tower hit. So that was kind of this weird, holy shit moment that the country had together. Yeah.
Right. Well, to expand the analogy of the four-letter word, 2020 has been a shit show. How is the CV Independent doing, and how are you doing, and how are your husband doing? I know that you both have been recently up to San Francisco. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that. As you know, my husband and I have our business up there as well, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say about how San Francisco versus Palm Springs during this time. But first, talk to me about the CV Independent, which, by the way, a lot of people are grateful for the way you cover local news. Thank you.
We're doing okay. The fact that we are such a small publication, it's me and one employee and about 15 regular, fantastic paid contributors. The fact that we're relatively small, the fact that our monthly our print edition is once a month as opposed to weekly, like a lot of other alternative papers around the country. The fact that we are small and we were able to, this is the word that everyone keeps using, one of the words of 2020, pivot. We were able to pivot. And we were really able to kind of change our coverage. I remember that same week that we're talking about, when everything started to shut down, turning off our online events calendar for a while. We've since turned it back on with virtual events mostly. But we're doing okay. Our advertising dropped about 80%. It's down. It's now back up to about a little more than half of what it was, but we're doing okay because we've gotten some help. We got a Riverside County grant. Facebook and Google have both stepped up and helped give newspapers around the country, including Coachella Valley Independent, some funding. And the thing that's been really gratifying is our readers have stepped up. In our daily digest, which we used to do 5 days a week, we're now down to 3 because I'm the one doing it, and I was going to go completely insane if I had 5 days worth of doing this on my plate. We put a little link in to say, hey, if you support what we're doing, please consider becoming a supporter of the Independent. And our readers really have, and everything from $5 on up to $500. And so those things put together, our future is secure for the immediate future, and that's good and that's gratifying. Obviously, I haven't paid myself in a while, but everyone else is getting paid, and the print bill's getting paid. And our print edition, a lot of publications around the country suspended their print editions and are now coming back. Either a lot of weeklies are now every other week, or they're monthlies. We never stopped doing our monthly print edition. We went down from about 16,000 in circulation to about 10,000. Well, we're going to be up to 14,500. We're going to be at over 90% of our circulation for the October edition because people are out and people are picking it up. So the Independent's doing okay. It's been so gratifying to see the response that we've gotten. And on a personal level, we're doing okay as well. My husband, I'm very blessed that Garrett has a full-time paying job. He actually works for a company called Cognizant and is contracted to Wells Fargo in San Francisco. And he's doing okay. He's hanging in, and he's been able to be home. He was splitting time between San Francisco and Palm Springs before all hell broke loose. And he's been able to be home, and that's been really nice and lovely. And actually, he's been home since January. He actually slipped in a rainstorm outside of the Safeway on Market Street and busted his kneecap in mid-January. And I went up and we brought him home, and he's actually been home ever since then. So
you must really like each other.
Yeah, we actually do, unfortunately. Although I do have my office, and I'm at my office today, so I can flee home if I need to for a little bit of just a break, so I'm not at the same place all the time. Right. But all things considered, 2020 has been a shit show, as we mentioned earlier, but there have been some blessings as well that I'm grateful for.
Yeah, well, I made a small donation to you, and I was pleased to, and mainly urge everyone else to do the same thing. I did the same thing with another independent newspaper in San Francisco, the San Francisco Bay Times, because nowadays we need really on the ground local journalists like you more than ever. And I'm not just blowing smoke. There's so much smoke out there, metaphorically and real, that our local press is really, really important during this pandemic. Talk to me a little bit about the other part of what we were discussing. How do you think Palm Springs is going to come out of this vis-a-vis the other place that you and your husband know so well, and my husband and I know so well, San Francisco?
Well, obviously, a lot of this depends on how long and what benefits come as we're fighting this pandemic. The longer this goes, the more places, whether in San Francisco or Palm Springs or Walla Walla, Washington, just aren't going to make it. I know a lot of businesses, PPP money is starting to run out. So it's going to be a tough road to hoe no matter what. However, Palm Springs seems to be doing okay. A lot of restaurants have adapted to the patio dining and seem to be doing at least okay with that. Obviously they're at limited capacity, but I think Palm Springs, because it is a little bit calmer, it's a little bit more spread out. I think the Coachella Valley is in a better position than a place like San Francisco, where a lot of people are getting the heck out of there. San Francisco, especially the financial district and Soma and parts of San Francisco, they have a different vibe during the day because all the people pre-COVID were there working and going to the offices and stuff like that. And we were up there about a month ago. And as you know, the financial district, South of Market, Union Square are just dead. You get a little further out and the city picks up some life, but a lot of those parts of the city are dead. And frankly, I don't think that's coming back anytime soon. And most of the major tech companies that have offices in that area, some of them have said that they aren't looking at having employees back in their offices until next summer. at the latest, or at the earliest, I'm sorry. And so that indicates that San Francisco is in for a tough road. But you look at Palm Springs, a lot of people who are smarter than I am are really betting on Palm Springs. You look at Southwest Airlines coming in, JetBlue just added another flight, another small boutique airline is coming into Palm Springs. Clearly, a lot of people are looking at Palm Springs and thinking that this is a place we need to be. And you look at the real estate market. My husband and I were actually looking at maybe later this year starting the process of looking for a home. We actually have an apartment right now, but we can't afford one right now because real estate values here are continuing to go up and up and up, and the inventory is very small. And so, you know, you look at those indicators and it looks like Palm Springs, well, we're still in for a very, very, very tough couple months to year to 2 years. You know, a lot of people are betting on us, and that's encouraging.
Yeah. You know, I was up in San Francisco along with my husband, Alfredo, just last week for work. And of course, before all this happened, I called the 6 a.m. Alaska flight, my Muni, which for people in San Francisco know what I'm talking about, and took it 3 or 4 times a month for work. We've only been back once since June. And it was a different vibe in San Francisco. But lately I am hearing that people are trying to adapt. A lot of outdoor dining is going on there, like here's happening in Palm Springs. So I'm hoping that the legendary icon of San Francisco, the Phoenix, will come to roost and be reborn. It's certainly a place that's near and dear to both of us. But you're right. It's interesting. San Francisco as a big city has bigger problems, and it's a bigger ship to turn. Palm Springs is doing a little bit better. So knock wood that both places will come out of this. What is your gut as to, and again, it's all fingers in the wind. Anyone who says they know what's going on is crazy or lying. But from what you're seeing about the numbers in Riverside County, and I know you track carefully the COVID numbers, what are you seeing and what are you sensing as to how long it takes to get out of this? And by get out of this, I mean, that's not a one day we're in it and one day we're not. It's a progression. What do you see?
Well, I think that we're in for a lot of, I hate to say it, but a lot of starts and stops. I don't think it'll be as dramatic as this summer, the spring and summer, where literally everything closed and then almost literally everything opened back up again and we had to backslide. I'll give you 2 case studies which are still developing in terms of counties. Riverside County, as of the numbers of the state, as you know, David, every Tuesday they release the new numbers that they're using to determine the reopenings per county. And they've got 4 levels. Riverside County, as of now, is in the lowest purple level. However, just a couple hours ago, they updated the numbers, and Riverside County's numbers, both in terms of the positivity rate and the number of cases per 1,000, actually meet the criteria to move up into the red level. And that's a big deal. If we can do that for 2 weeks, that means that indoor dining can open, I believe, at 25%. Gyms can open at 10%. I believe movie theaters can open at 25%. I'm not quite sure on all those percentages because they're all so different. But that's a big deal in terms of the reopening process. And there's a very good chance that this time next week, Riverside County could be preparing for that. But then you go down to San Diego, which has been reopened now, at that level at least, for several weeks. And all of a sudden, this week, I believe it's their cases per 100,000 numbers they're up over 8, I believe, and they need to be below 7. So there's a very good chance that Riverside County next week could go up to the red level and have more reopenings. And there's a very good chance that San Diego, if they're in that for 2 weeks, they're going to have to move back down into the purple level, which means indoor dining has to close and stuff like that. And that makes me wonder if the counties in California are going to keep doing this, that once businesses are allowed to reopen more, that means that there are riskier behaviors like being inside and taking off your masks to have a meal, if that's going to lead to an increase in cases. And possibly it might also lead to more people feel comfortable and maybe not wearing their masks as often as they should, but that worries me, the fact that, San Diego County is backsliding and Riverside County is moving that direction. I'm afraid that it's going to be a while before, we finally get some stabilization. And in terms of an actual quote unquote return to normalcy like we had back in February and March before this all went down, that's a very long time away, unfortunately.
Next summer?
Next summer, I'd say is probably the best case scenario. If we can get a vaccine by the end of the year, or some new drugs come out to help treat this, I think that's possible. But when you're talking about a virus and a disease that we know so little about, we don't know how long immunity lasts. We don't know how these vaccines are going to go. We've learned so much in it was late December where this was officially recognized as a thing. It's been 8 months, basically 9 months since then. And we've learned a lot. And, you look at another 8 months, 9 months from now, that's when we're getting into the summer, like you were talking about. Who knows what we're going to learn, but it's going to take a while. It really is.
I remember the last collegial meal I had was with you and the great Brad Furr at Thai Smile. And that was during that window where we thought, oh, things are getting better.
Yep.
But then we still all ate outside because there's so much uncertainty. Alfredo and I have what we call the COVID scale. It's from 1 to 10. And a COVID 1 is someone who believes this is a total hoax, probably someone wearing a MAGA hat. And a COVID 10 is someone who says, I'm not going out of the house until 2030. Where do you fall on that scale today? Because it might be different tomorrow.
I'm probably, the 10 is I'm not leaving the house, right?
Yes.
I want to make sure I get the scale. I'm probably at about a 7. I feel comfortable at certain restaurants because they're doing the right thing, having an outside meal. 849, Willie Ryan at 849 has done an amazing job. Their tables are all well more than 6 feet apart. I feel comfortable doing that. I feel comfortable going to other places. Grocery shopping, now that we know what we know about surfaces, they aren't as scary as aerosols, and we know that prolonged exposure is a big deal. I'm not as worried about going to the store and picking up something or going grocery shopping once a week. Increasing amount of information is coming out about flying. 2 or 3 months ago, I would have never dreamt of flying to San Francisco, but now that a lot of science and evidence is coming out that the number of COVID cases that can actually be tracked to an airline flight, because they recirculate the air so often, is relatively low. My husband and I are going to need to make a trip to San Francisco next month. We're probably going to fly, and we feel more comfortable doing that. But by the same token, you look at the San Diego example and the other science is coming out about poorly ventilated spaces. I don't see myself eating indoors at a restaurant, no matter what precautions they're taking, probably until at least the new year, probably longer. Right. I wouldn't feel comfortable going into a crowded theater and seeing something, less about the audience around me, but more about the actors on stage. Singing and yelling gets a lot of that virus out in the aerosols.
Yes.
So I'm probably around a 7 in terms of that scale, where I'm very, very cautious. But by the same token, I feel perfectly comfortable going to 849 or Trilusa in Cathedral City, which is, by the way, Trilusa is probably the best example I've seen in the Valley of taking over space. They're in the quote unquote downtown Cathedral City area, and they've taken over the front, the side. They've got tables everywhere, and they're actually partnering with the Roost, which I think is doing a very good job, with 3 or 4 other restaurants. And, these are places, because it's ventilated, because it's outside, because everything's well spaced, I feel relatively comfortable going.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, none of them are clients. So just, for the record, no money passing hands here. But Trilusa and Roost, Alfredo and I have really enjoyed, because they have made a wonderful creative use of the space. Who knew that being outside, having a vodka or gin martini in 110-degree weather was going to be the thing this year? But it is. It is.
It really was. It really was. I remember trying to get, 8:30 reservations. And of course, now you've got to deal with the smoke, which is a whole other detail to deal with. But yeah, and it was, I remember the first couple times, and for the record, Trilusa and Roost aren't clients. 849 actually is a client of mine, but I'd be saying this regardless of whether or not they were a client of the Independent. I remember the first couple times we went to dinner, we went to 849, and how the first time it was a little bit scary, but then it was very, very liberating, especially, when you realize they're doing it right. I won't name names because, I might have just had a bad experience, but there have been a couple places that I wouldn't go to again because the tables seemed a little bit closer than 6 feet, or the servers kept taking off their masks to talk to each other, or things like that. There are a couple places that will not be getting my business as a result of that.
Well, I agree with you. A great shout out to 849, also V Wine Bar. I think it's done a great job. But the one night that we were having dinner out during that brief period we talked about, we saw Jeff Kors and James Williamson and Ms. Kibbe having a dinner outside, all masked. So people are getting on. We have to keep on keeping on. As you know, I'm a believer in pragmatic optimism. I understand people who are COVID-10s, and I respect it. But I also have a great deal of empathy for small business people like you and me, and the people who clean our pools, cut our lawns, do our laundry, bag our groceries, wash our cars, the people that really sometimes they can't work at home or do a Zoom interview like we do. So I just want to tell people, please, be careful, but understand there's a lot of people out there that don't get a PPP and they don't have the luxury of living at home. In our last few moments, I'd like to end on optimism. Give us an optimistic assessment of how you think we're going to get through all of this.
Well, the thing, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I think the thing that gives me hope is how far we've come. I mean, to repeat, this was the novel coronavirus. It's called COVID-19 because I believe it was December 29th. I'm not sure on the exact date. Where it was finally identified in China. Right now we're here in mid-September. So we're talking about it's been less than 9 months since we knew this virus existed. And look at how far things have come in treatments. Look at how, even though cases have been bad, the death rate has been going down a little bit because we've gotten better. We know remdesivir works in certain cases, one of the drugs, the treatment. At first they were putting everyone who got really, really sick on ventilators. Not everyone, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Now we know that ventilators may not be the way to go and that proning people is good. We also know a lot more about how it is spread. We know that surfaces aren't as scary as they need to be, but we know that, aerosols and close quarters and a lack of ventilation is very, very bad. We just linked to a story in our Daily Digest about, it is an unproven, so take this with a huge grain of salt, but there's now some scientists that believe that the very act of wearing masks is helping create herd immunity, because one of the things we know about the virus now is that the amount of virus you're exposed to has, to at least some degree, that helps determine how sick you get. So a lot of people might get a little bit of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, just a little bit though, because they're wearing a mask, and as a result, they might have an asymptomatic infection and may end up developing some sort of immunity to this. We've learned a lot between now and that summertime where we're hoping next year when Palm Springs will be closer to normal. We're going to learn a lot more. And so that's what gives me hope. That's what makes me positive, is that we've learned a lot. We've come a long way. Unfortunately, it's been at the expense of 200,000 deaths in the United States and a lot of people who are very, very sick and will be as a result of this. But we have come a long way in terms of knowing about this, and we're going to get better, and we're going to learn more about what businesses can and can't open. And, we're going to make the best of this until we no longer have to make the best of it.
Well, a lot of the learning that we have done, certainly here in the Coachella Valley, is from Jimmy Boegle, all of his staff and writers at the CV Independent. So Jimmy, thank you for helping us all keep on keeping on. This is David Perry, wishing you to be safe and healthy. And remember the 3 W's: wash your hands, wear a mask, and wait in line 6 feet apart, and avoid the 3 C's: closed spaces with bad ventilation, crowded spaces, and close conversations. As I always say, keep your droplets to yourself. Thanks, Jimmy. Ahoy.
Thank you.